Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see on the tabletop in front of us, we've got some suspension pieces, and as you guys can see, we have a lower control arm from the back of the Corvette. This is particular to the passenger side. And kind of got started on this project a little bit early just because I wanted to figure out how bad it was to install, these bushings, these ball joints and all that. So we got one corner done. It took quite a while, and hopefully I can help you guys get this project done quicker than I got it done. I ran into a lot of issues, and hopefully with this video series we can show you kind of some of the pitfalls that I ran into, and hopefully we can show you some tips and tricks on a way for you guys to finish this easier and faster than I did. So this project is going to include new poly bushings in the control arm itself, as well as new ball joints. So we're basically going to be doing a full suspension kind of restoration and upgrade on the Corvette. The factory bushings are 15 plus years old, so at this point they are 15 years old, so they're quite old and they could stand to be replaced. And so what we're going to be upgrading is a set of energy suspension front and rear. So this is the front. It's part number 33176R. R stands for red. I believe you can get 33176B for black, or maybe it's just 33176, I'm not sure. So that's going to be your front set. And here's some of the bushings, kind of like we said. And this is the rear set, so this is 33177R, and like I said, so this project kind of fell in our lap. When we picked up that roll cage, I'll have a link to that video up above. It actually came with all these suspension pieces. I wasn't really planning on doing any of these upgrades, but the guy was getting rid of his car, he was parting it out. He included all the suspension stuff, the bushings, the ball joints and whatnot, with the roll cage. So I'm kind of like, that's actually a pretty good deal. So that's kind of where we're at today. Those are the bushings. The ball joints, now here's the secret. The front ball joints will actually fit the back, and vice versa. You will not be able to find a part number for the back ball joints at all. I'm not sure why they do that, but it's just kind of the way they do it. So the ball joints are part numbers K500 134, and the other one is K6537. So the 6537 will be the lower, the K500 134, that will be the upper. We did the lower, and as you guys can see, that's pretty much done. The one thing you're going to need for this whole project, well, two things. One is going to be this. You need a ball joint tool set. I'm not going to open this up, but this is actually from Harbor Freight. It's part number MA10-1. This is their 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive ball joint service kit, and you're definitely going to need that for this project. And the last thing that you're going to need is a angle grinder with a brush. I bought this Milwaukee angle grinder a while ago. I've used it a couple times, and actually the brush attachment came from Harbor Freight as well. And you're going to need this tool for actually cleaning up the bushings. As you guys can see, this is actually one of the rear control arm bushings. I haven't popped off the alignment outer washers yet, but basically it goes right here, and actually, no, sorry, it goes on the other side, and this is what the alignment grooves, if that's what you want, those discs on the alignment tabs, that's what this spins on. So the way you guys are going to get your bushings out, I've seen a number of people do it a number of different ways. I haven't really seen anyone come up with a really solid, easy way to do it. I just pushed my bushings out, and then I either cut it off with a knife as much as I could, then I used the angle grinder with the spinning wheel with the brush on it to clean up what was left of the rubber, or you could burn it. I don't really recommend that. It works, but it doesn't work at the same time. I actually burnt this one last night because I just let it burn outside while I was working on other things. And what happens with that is it loosens up the rubber, real nice and easy, so you can cut it. But I still had to come back inside, cut the remains off with a knife, and then I still had to use the stainless steel wire brush on the angle grinder to clean up what was left of the rubber bushing. So, unless there's an easy way for you guys to unless someone knows a better way, comment down below. I'm just not sure. But cleaning off these bushings, these sleeves, is kind of what sucks. And what I'm talking about, see the polyurethane bushing? There's no liner inside of it. So what they want you to do is take the GM bushing, cut all the rubber stuff off, and slide that inside of the new poly bushing. If they just came with sleeves, this wouldn't be that hard to manufacture. I don't understand why Energy Suspension doesn't include it. But if they came with sleeves, this job would be knocked out so much quicker than it takes. It's like you can pop the bushings out real easily, but getting these sleeves out is what is the biggest pain in the butt for this entire swap. So now that we've gone over the parts and pieces, let's go ahead and get started on the car. So to remove the coilover, there are two 13mm bolts that have to come out. There is a 24mm nut and bolt on the bottom. Get all three of those out and that will be able to come out. As for the upper control arm itself, there's a ball joint here. That should be 18mm, as well as the 18mm bolts going through the body into the frame, holding the upper bushings for the rear control arm. So there's one up front, one out back. But the one thing you're probably going to need to do is actually take off this 18mm nut for the rear tow rod, because with this in place, it makes it really hard to get the coilover out, because you're trying to wiggle it back and forth. You really need to pop out this rear tow rod for that to come all the way out. And this should just lift right out of the way. There you go. There's one coilover out of the way. Alright, so we got the rear control arm loose. You guys will see it's flopping around down here. The ball joint's obviously been popped out. And I actually had to put one of the upper control arm bolts back in, just so that we could get this on here tight enough, and that way we could hit it with a hammer and knock this down. So we have the upper control arm mounted into the ball joint removal tool. Basically what we have is we've put the smallest sleeve that's available on the opposite end that you're pushing from, and then the push rod is coming from our impact that'll be going through the ball joint removal tool, and it's going to press down into here, and so the bushing will get pushed down into the bottom of this sleeve, and this should push the bushing out of our control arm. Alright, now we're getting into the really crappy part of actually getting the sleeve, all the rubber off of it. So as you guys can see, I've actually cut this down with a pocket knife. I used my drill press a little bit, and I was able to cut around the actual rubber sleeve. I got most of it cut off. To get this thing finally cleaned up, we're actually going to use that Milwaukee angle grinder with the brush attachment. We're going to use that to pretty much grind off the last of this rubber. So alright, so here's your finished product. It was seriously messy, but we got our sleeve cleaned up, and the other sleeve is already done, and it's right here. So now that we got both sleeves done, we can go ahead and put them in our bushings and get the bushings in the control arm. Alright, so putting the bushings in really isn't that hard. I actually managed to squeeze these front ones in by hand. Alright, so you guys can see we have the one end. We've already finished putting that in place. We're going to push this sleeve in. We're just going to use our Harbor Freight press here, and we'll push all this back in. Alright, so here's the rear upper control arm project being done. Obviously we haven't done the lowers yet. That's going to be next. So all I've done is put these bolts, the upper bolts, in loosely, and I put the nut back on the ball joint right here loose as well. So for the lower control arm, one of the things you're going to want to do is make a mark on your alignment. This way your rear control arms stay pretty much not in the same spot, but at least close enough for you to get to alignment chop. So as you guys will see, put a mark on both sides, and I actually put a mark on the back side as well. That way we have no issue lining this back up. The next thing you're going to want to do is actually disconnect the rear sway bar. You need to disconnect this from here because this connects to the lower control arm. I'm just gonna take the nut and bolts off on the bottom here, so that'll swing out of the way. And then the last step will actually be to pop both of the bolts out. Then the last thing you're gonna wanna do is actually pop the ball joint as well. So we got to get that nut off. All right, so we have the lower control arm off. Just same setup as earlier. Just go ahead and put your ball joint press tool, put your impact on it, and send it. Now it's time to pull out the ball joint, and as you guys can see, we have the end of the ball joint through the end of the press tool. And basically what we're doing is, you guys see the sleeve right here, we're trying to push the ball joint into that sleeve. So what's going to happen is the tool tightens, it's going to push this bottom end into the control arm and into the sleeve. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have knocked a good chunk of this out. I'm just gonna hit the rest of this out with a hammer and we should be able to get this loose. All right, so we are putting the new ball joint in. We've got it started just a little bit, and basically we put the sleeve on the bottom. We're trying to push the ball joint through the sleeve, and then we're trying to get the stem of the ball joint, you know, in through the middle down here, down there. So let's go ahead and get started on this. All right, looks like we're good, guys. That we got the ball joint completely flush with the bottom here. Yeah, we should be good. So now that we've got the ball joint installed, you want to put your dust boot and your castle nut on here. All right, now we can go ahead and get these sleeves cleaned up. I got to get the rubber ground off this one. And that one we need to get split, cut, and then that one cleaned off too. Then we can go ahead and put the new energy suspension bushings in. All right, to install the rear bushing, you guys cannot use the ball joint tool just because this is way too slippery. It'll just slip in and out. Your tool will fly loose. I messed around with this for 2 hours on the passenger side rear lower control arm. So what we're going to be using today is actually a piece of all thread, some washers, a bearing, and a nut. So what we're going to do is basically thread the bushing into the control arm like this. We've got our bearing on the other side. Then we're going to put this nut on the back side. And this is going to be our install tool. All right, so that's going to be it for the lower control arm. We got both of the bushings in as well as the new ball joints. So let's go ahead and get this installed in the car. All right, guys, we are starting to tear apart the front driver's side of the Corvette. You'll see that I've already removed the wheel as well as the brake caliper and the rotor. The rotor's back there. To take the caliper off, it's simply two 21mm bolts. Take those out, and I set the caliper over on a small stool, put some padding underneath it, you know, a detailing rag, and that way you don't screw up the caliper paint. And we should be good to go. So what we're gonna do first is actually loosen up all of the ball joints and tie rods. So there's the tie rod here, there's a ball joint here, and there's a ball joint down below. I'm gonna try to take all of those nuts off. I think they're either 18 or 19mm in diameter. We'll get all those off. So we got the 3 nuts off, the tie rod's disconnected, the upper and lower ball joints have both been removed. The nut sizes were 21mm, 18mm, and the tie rod was 18mm as well. But I'm actually gonna have to remove the coilover first. So what I'm gonna do is actually remove the upper control arm, And these are 4 15mm bolts. Just take them out. And there are shims or spacers behind some of them. The other side had 2 spacers on the front and 1 spacer in the back. Make sure you keep that stuff all organized, and that way when you go back for your alignment and you put this all together, it's within spec. So the upper control arm actually just fell out of place. You guys will notice that we put the hardware back in the holes. That's just to make sure we don't lose anything. And we should be able to lift the control arm up out of the car once you get it past the spring. Alright guys, so we actually end up getting the lower spindle loose, that lower ball joint. We tried to use a pickle fork in the beginning, and all I did was manage to like get it stuck in there, and that was really about it. This pickle fork wasn't really wide enough to go all the way back and press this up. So what I ended up doing was putting the nut, the 21mm nut back on, and I just started hitting it with a hammer, you know, real big hammer actually, this one, a mini sledge. Started hitting it down, and it actually had enough force to get the spindle loose. So as you guys can see, we have the spindle off the car. Oh, and make sure you disconnect the ABS sensor. I forgot that. That's this electrical line right here. So alright guys, so we popped the 2 13mm bolts and nuts off the bottom. The 13mm bolt goes through the top, and there's a nut on the bottom, and you obviously just heard the coilover kind of fall. And the top here is held in with a 14mm nut. That's it for pretty much the front suspension. I still got to take the lower control arm off, but before we do that, we're going to mark it like we've done every other corner. And basically what we're doing is just creating a hash line, you know, just to line up when we get the subframe back in. Alright guys, we got the lower suspension out. Wasn't too difficult. All I had to do was take the 21mm bolts that hold these in, so that's what these are. It's 21mm bolt head and nut head as well. Put a socket and a wrench on it. I was able to zip this right out. And like I said, here are the marks I made. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them on the frame. Yeah, you can kind of see them. We'll basically have a rough idea of where to put it, and hopefully it's within the old alignment specs. So there you go. That is the entire front suspension torn apart. Nothing is left on the car except for the tie rod. And we'll get started on the bushing swap. Alright guys, you can see we are working on the upper control arm. And the easiest way that I found to remove these bushings was actually cut the lip off here. And here you guys can already see we cut that one off. So cut the lip off with a knife. Make sure you got your whole control arm anchored on something. I have it just hooked up to the drill press. Alright, so as you guys can see, we actually got the outer side already off, and I'm kind of halfway through getting this side off. Basically all I did was I put the upper control arm in my shop press, and I'm basically just wiggling it back and forth. And I have sprayed a little bit of WD-40 on the end of the rubber piece. That way it just loosens up a little bit. Wiggle it back and forth, and eventually you'll get the bushing out. Alright, so you guys can see we got the sleeves out. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our angle grinder with a wire brush attachment, burn through these. We'll get the we'll use that stainless steel wire brush to get these cleaned off, get the sleeves out, and that's the fastest way that I've been able to get these things clean. I've tried cutting them, I've tried burning them. Honestly, the fastest way is just to use that angle grinder. Alright guys, you can see that we have the bushing in the sleeve, and we're about to press it in with our shop press. And just like that, we have our last bushing pushed in. So now the top control arm is done and ready to be installed on the car. Now I do want to say this. You guys can see that there is a round hole, an oval, an oval, and an oval. The very front round hole, I'm not sure if you guys can read that, but it says F. So that is front for the driver's side. So it'll go on the car like that. And this is the front of the driver's side upper control arm. All right, guys, as we did with the upper control arm, we're working on the lower control arm here. I have it just set up in the shop press, and as you guys can see, you'll see that we actually cut the lip off the this sleeve and bushing. We're actually gonna end up doing the same on this side. We're just using a knife, like I said, cut out the lip, and then we're gonna push the bushings out that way and that way. All right, guys, you can see we got the bushings out on the front and back of the lower control arm. Here's the bushings, and we pretty much used the same technique that we've used for all of them. Kind of used my ball joint tool removal, pushed it out a little bit, and then this back one I was able to grab a big screwdriver and just stick it in the sleeve, and I was able to get that popped loose. And then the front, I was actually just able to use the tool and a small spacer, and I was able to push it right out. Alright, guys, you can see that we got these sleeves completely cleaned up, and we got the end caps pushed off. I just used a pickle fork and a vise. Here's the control arm. I actually pushed these in by hand. They are not very difficult to put in. These are actually sized pretty appropriately. And as you guys can see, the inner edge on both of the bushings, it doesn't have a lip on it, so literally just slides right in. So that's the lower control arm pretty much done. All right, so I was able to get the lower sleeve all the way in, but this upper one was a little bit tight, so we're just going to use the press to get that in. The sleeve is all the way in. Now all we got to do is kind of release the pressure, tighten this on, and we'll put the bottom sleeve cap on, and we'll be done with the bushing install. Alright, guys, so that's actually going to be it for today's video. You saw that we got all of the ball joints changed out. We got all of the control arm bushings swapped out on the front end and the back. And what's going to be next is actually to drop the front subframe. And you guys saw that subframe project where we welded it a while ago. I'll have a video to that link above. That's pretty much going to be next. So instead of making this video super long, it's already actually pretty long, we'll actually include the front suspension install with the subframe video, because those two videos kind of go together. So that's actually be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you guys want to check out that future Corvette content with the subframe swap, you know, reinstalling the front suspension, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on your bell notifications, and if you guys want to help support the channel, click all the links down below. I should have links to the ball joints, the suspension bushing kits, and whatever else we've installed today, and that should be about it. Oh, and also, check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.